In a programming language, the first thing we teach are usually how to define variables so that you can manipulate data. A very important concept in defining variables is the scope of that variable. What does scope mean? A scope is the part of the program where the variable can be referenced. Referencing a variable means accessing that variable to assign a value or use the value of the variable. So where you can access the variable is the scope of that variable. The scope of a local variable starts from its declaration line and it continues to the end of the block. A block is a piece of code that is enclosed in a pair of braces. A local variable must be declared before it can be used. So you can declare a variable anywhere you want in a program. You can also declare a variable whenever you need it in the program. You don't have to declare all the variables right at the beginning of a function or the main function. You can also declare a local variable with the same name multiple times, but they have to be in different blocks or in different scopes. This means you can declare a variable, for example, with name x inside the main function. You can declare another variable with the same name x inside a different function or different method. These two will be assumed as two different variables by the compiler. But you cannot declare a local variable twice in the same block or in nested blocks. Here's an example. We have a public static void method 1 here. The scope starts, the whole method is inside this pair of braces between the first line and the end line here. Inside the method, we have a for loop. For loop starts here and it ends here in this brace, right brace. Inside the for loop, we have a declaration of int I, an integer value I, which is also used as the for loop's counter. And since I is defined right at the beginning of for, I is actually accessible inside the whole for loop. But the scope of I does not extend outside of the for loop, which means you cannot access variable I outside of this for loop, but I is accessible inside the for loop. So that's why we call it, this is the scope of I. Somewhere in the for loop, another integer is defined. This is integer j. The scope of j starts at this line where it is defined and it ends with this right braces. On the left side of the slide, you see an example where we have two different for loops. You can see that the same integer I is defined in both of the loops, and this is okay. It is perfectly fine to declare I in two non-nesting blocks. They will be treated as two different variables. On the right side, though, we have nesting blocks. We have the block of the method 2 between these two braces. And inside the static void method 2, we have a for loop. This is a nesting loop inside the method. Now, Inside the method, the first line defines an integer I, and it assigns the value of 1 to that integer. Then, after that, a for loop is declared, and inside the for loop, we have another integer definition with the same name I. This is not valid. So this is wrong, and you will get a compiling error at this point.